Let's head into this newscast with our top focus coming in from South Korea, as people in South Korea are now rushing to malls and beaches on the first long weekend since the country has begun easing coronavirus curbs last month. The country is all set to further relax social distancing rules in the coming 2 days and allowing a phased reopening of businesses as the nation has largely managed to bring the COVID-19 outbreak under control. Widespread testing, intensive contact tracing and tracking apps have enabled South Korea to limit the spread of the virus, and rather than relying on the lengthy lockdowns adopted by most of the countries. For more details, let's quickly go across to our guest, Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly, who is joining me on this live broadcast. He's an American political analyst on inter-Korean affairs. He's a professor of political science at National University of Busan. Thank you so much, Professor Kelly, for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let me begin by asking, South Korea is all set to ease restrictions on even sports like football and baseball, even in the entertainment sector. Is the country adequately prepared to handle large gatherings?
Yeah, I think it is. It's now been, I think, 2 or 3 days in a row where there have been 0 new cases. It's been under 10 now for, I think, 2 weeks. You certainly see all the suppression mechanisms everywhere. The schools are still closed. If you step into an elevator, you have to wash your hands. If you enter a building, you have to get temperature checked. I think a lot of that stuff will stay, so that, if you go back to work, for example, you're still going to get checked. And so I think this is something of an experiment. But, it's been pretty under control now for, I would say, a good 3 weeks. I mean, it's not like it was, 6 weeks ago when you were afraid to go outside. So I think this is an experiment. And if it surges back, I think the South Korean government will pull back pretty quick.
Now, Doctor, since no transmission has been reported from the elections, have the elections proved to be a successful drill for the country to go ahead with the easing of lockdown measures?
Yeah, I think they have. I mean, broadly speaking, the lockdown or the election has been considered to be pretty successful. So I think that, as a dry run, if you will, as sort of like a practice test of what it would be like if you had, say, I don't know, churches opened or races or something like that, or like a soccer game or something like that. My sense is that's probably what they were thinking. But yeah, it's worth pointing out that the election was actually pretty layered up. I mean, my wife is a Korean and she went and voted and she had to wear gloves and all this sort of stuff. It's not like you just walked in there. I mean, the social distancing and the rules were actually pretty strict.
Great. Doctor, regarding Asian economies now, including those of China, Singapore and South Korea, as corporate debt is rising fast as the pandemic has hit revenues, what are the sectors hit the hardest in South Korea, and how's the government resurrecting its staggering economy?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar. I think it's similar to what a lot of other countries would say. I mean, tourism has taken a big boost, right? I mean, a big hit because nobody's flying anymore. The airlines are all a mess. 2, you're actually seeing a major merger in Korea right now that's sort of being discussed a lot in the newspapers. Exports are down simply because there's just not room to send stuff abroad. I mean, it's even difficult to mail things out of Korea, which is sort of kind of bizarre because there's just not that much, there just aren't that many planes flying back and forth, and so space is contracted. I mean, it's been anything that's connected Korea to other countries has taken a major hit, and since Korea is pretty export-oriented, it's been pretty wide. They're expecting pretty high unemployment spikes.
All right. Now, Doctor, there's a sort of fatigue creeping into people due to lengthy lockdowns. What can countries like India learn from South Korea in terms of the coronavirus containment?
That it's going to take a long time. I mean, I get asked this a lot. I'm an American, so I get asked this a lot in the United States, which has seen sort of these protests against the lockdowns.
Right.
And in South Korea, I mean, it just took a long time. People started talking about this in a serious way in the end of February. The lockdown really began in, probably the first or second week of March, and now it's May. I mean, we've been in the house. My kids haven't gone to school properly in 2.5 months. I'm still doing, I'm a teacher. I still teach over Zoom. I mean, this is going to take a long time, and it's only really in the last few days when the numbers got to single digits of new cases that the South Korean government even began to talk about reopening. I mean, I'm kind of shocked. I can't speak for India. I don't know the case as well, but I'm kind of shocked in the United States that President Trump is talking about reopening when the Americans are still kicking up several thousand new cases a day. I mean, in South Korea, that conversation just never happened.
Right, but don't you think that the focus needs to be on contact tracing and testing?
Yeah, the problem with that, well, at least to the United States, the problem with that is there's a lot of sort of privacy concerns from both the libertarian left and the right. In South Korea, South Koreans have just been willing to sort of make that swap. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, for example, the apps that allowed you to sort of see who had corona near you. And in the United States, that will wind up in court. Right. I'm actually rather curious to know if India would do that. I don't know.
Right, Doctor, before I quickly let you go, now yesterday there was exchange of gunfire between North and South Korea amid stalled negotiations between Kim and Trump. Where do you analyze Moon Jae-in's situation and how will this pandemic impact the political scenario between the three nations?
It's probably going to set back everything for several months at minimum. If Corona gets into North Korea, which it probably has because it's gotten in everywhere else, that's going to distract the North Koreans really badly. North Korea doesn't have anything like a modern healthcare system to deal with this. So if it does get in there, there's a very serious possibility that it could really fly around the country very rapidly. A lot of people think that's why Kim disappeared for 3 weeks, that he was sort of ducking Corona. I would imagine that there won't be any serious meetings or any serious conversations between the three parties until this thing gets under control, maybe in by August. But right now, everything's just sort of frozen.
Truly unfortunate how this has been a waste of effort. But thank you so much, Dr. Robert Kelly, for joining us on this broadcast.